Hi, welcome back to Legacy of Leaders. I'm your host, Captain Rick Hoffman, and we have today Mia Obrien, who's on the staff and faculty of the University of North Florida's Taylor Leadership Institute. Welcome, Mia.
Thank you, Captain Rick. Happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
I pursued you for several months before I finally was able to tie you down because you have a very exciting and interesting story. Talk a little bit about what you do at TLI.
Yes, absolutely. So let's start with that job since, yes, I do wear many hats these days. But the Taylor Leadership Institute, my journey with Dr. Olson and the staff at UNF started back in 2021. I was actually
pick the best time of year to start a new gig in academia.
Here's the funny thing. Here's the funny thing. So the UNF athletics department wanted to create an Aussies award, which is their end of season.
Osprey. Yes. Aussies for Osprey.
Exactly.
Yeah, of course.
They wanted to because students were coming out of COVID. We were coming out of social distancing times. Many were getting vaccinated. They wanted to create an interactive, as much as they could, program that blew every other year out of the water. And so they had me MC it. We actually had it at UNF Arena. As much as, yes, I'm very blessed to be on national radio and national TV right now, I also have a secret dream of one day hosting the Golden Globes. And so I turned this into my own personal Golden Globes. And so I'm like amidst one of my many costume changes. And this guy comes up to me and he hands me his business card and he says, "We want you to teach." And I immediately think, oh, this guy thinks that I'm just going to bounce around and hype the students up. And then I look at where this individual taught, and it was Dr. Matthew Olson in the Taylor Leadership Institute. And dating back to my days at Ithaca College, the one thing besides sports and media that I was passionate about was leadership, the practice of and the theory of. And I was a student leadership consultant at Ithaca College, ran the Student Leadership Institute. And so I texted him and I was like, "You think that I just want to be your MC for events or something like that. But the reality is this is the one other thing I'm truly passionate about, and sharing that message with students." And so it's been a really amazing journey, starting as a academic coach, which is a fancy word for adjunct without a master's degree, and was an academic coach for 4 years. And when my sports media professional experiences shifted, I was lucky enough that at that time we had an opening in the Taylor Leadership Institute for a full-time position. And so now I am the coordinator of programming and community outreach, which is a fancy word for everything that isn't in the classroom setting, but that takes our students and gets them out into the community, into the greater campus community as well, which is certainly a pillar of the Taylor Leadership Institute.
Well, it's you and I first met through the Taylor Leadership Institute, and it's interesting for our audience today. The TLI was really just your side hustle for a while.
It was.
Because you really have many hats. They found you because of your radio and television career.
I was emceeing the Aussies. I was emceeing the Aussies, and this guy comes up to me, he hands me his business card, and I'm like, this joker has no idea.
But you've been at the national level, television, radio for many years as well.
So moved to Jacksonville in 2018 after 3 years in Iowa. Go Hawks. My first job out of college. And then I was with First Coast News for 3.5 years, then moved over. During my final year and a half at First Coast News, I was working part-time at 1010XL, while also academic coaching at UNF. So that was the initial period of Mia has too many jobs. Moved full-time to 1010XL in 2022. And then last summer was approached about the opportunity to start my trial year with ESPN. And lucky enough now that as we approach the 1-year mark of that contract beginning, that I've already signed an extension, a long-term extension with the Walt Disney Company. And so we'll be not only in a full-time role on the radio throughout the course of the next few years, but also we'll have the opportunity to work games on the radio, as well as helping the emerging digital brand for the Walt Disney Company, which of course includes the Disney Plus entities, ESPN Plus, a lot of the additional programming that's on TV that is the bridge we have seen through so many to eventually get to those higher roles, including of course hosting the Super Bowl, which Walt Disney, the Super Bowl is coming to ESPN, ABC, and the Walt Disney Company. I'm going to have to say that 19,000 times over the next year. I keep joking. So
nice to put that play. With Disney doesn't have enough advertising.
No, not at all. So it's a very exciting time, but I was very lucky that when the transition occurred last summer, which ultimately, look, so many people said to me, some jobs are jobs, some jobs are dreams. This is a dream. And my initial contract was for only 30 shows. I knew that I was still on the staff at UNF. And so I called Dr. Olson in hopes of adding on some additional classes to kind of offset the loss of income. And he said, actually, as a matter of fact, our good friend Mindy Herrick, who was my predecessor in this role as a graduate of TLI ×2, she had just joined our amazing partners at the Ritz-Carlton in Amelia Island in a full-time capacity. And he said, well, Mindy's not here. Do you want to apply for Mindy's job? And he's like, you basically have been helping her do that job for forever now. And so I said, sure, no problem.
Well, one of the exciting things that I've been involved with TLI since before you got here, but the Taylor Leadership Institute is kind of unique in the country. There's only a few programs that even approach their level, but more importantly, they've been so successful inside the college, the university. They're the number one out of 80 some
86
minors. When I first encountered them, they had maybe a couple hundred students involved, and now they have
900 plus.
900 plus.
We have, even in the summer term, I believe we have over 350 to 400 students taking summer courses.
The other piece of it that's been fun for me to participate in is the mentorship program.
Yes.
So anybody in my audience that's here in the Jacksonville area that's a professional that wants to mentor a young student who's going through the program, and they try to match somebody who's academically heading for a particular profession with their counterparts. And we've got some folks that are now working for the Jaguars, and got some folks now working for Ritz-Carlton. So it's a nice way to stay engaged with the young people that are coming out of college with that foundation of understanding not only the terms and conditions, but also the nature and character of leadership, which is why I've been so passionate about being involved myself. So.
Absolutely. And I was literally this morning, that was my morning assignments for what I call, my beautiful day job working at TLI, was on the phone trying to initiate. If we have anybody in the animal sciences that wants to mentor, we've got a lot of students this summer who are biology, they want to be a vet, they want to work at the zoo. And so I was on the phone this morning because despite the fact that we are blessed that we have a database that we have collected over the last 10 years of 150 plus mentors in the Jacksonville area who give their time to work with these students who are students enrolled in our leadership practicum capstone course. And then we match the students according to their career interests, major, et cetera. Despite all that, we don't have anybody who works at the zoo or is a vet. So I was on the phone this morning making some phone calls, seeing if there was anybody out there. And so that is one of my primary responsibilities. When I say I oversee the co-curricular programming, that is certainly one of the capstone projects, because it is in the pseudo capstone course, this idea of us pairing students with a mentor in their career interest field. They spend 5 hours with that mentor throughout the course of the semester. That is one of the co-curricular things that I oversee. And it's extremely rewarding. And it's something that even when I was still in a part-time capacity, it was something that I really enjoyed helping Mindy do.
Well, 3 weeks ago, a young lady sitting in that very seat was the deputy director of giving for the zoo. So,
so there we go.
Shoot me a note.
Oh man, see, I mean, this student wants to be a vet, but like at the same time, I was like going through the database last night, and I'm like, we don't even have the zoo on here.
Start next time. Just shoot me a note.
I know.
My network is pretty extensive. That's how you got here.
Exactly.
But again, the mentorship program, I'll put in a pitch. It's very rewarding. The other thing about it, and this is why I've been so engaged at UNF, and you deal with it every day. It's almost probably air to you or water to a fish, but if all you do is watch the news about the young people in America today, you don't have a clue what's really going on with these kids. No. I remember when I first got to my first ship, the chief petty officer talking about all these young kids today. 10 years later, I get to my next ship, the chief petty officer talking about all these young kids today. I'm thinking, wait a minute, that was you 10 years ago. And the reality is yes, they may look at their devices differently than we did because we didn't have them. But as far as focus, dedication, diligence, work ethic, I find these are the same kids I grew up with.
So 2 thoughts on that. Number one ties into my background in sports media. I have been fascinated by my friend, who I'm going to plug because he always loves when I plug him, the Athletic senior columnist, Mike Silver. Mike Silver, of course, wrote the book, The Why is Everything, about Kyle Shanahan, the Sean McVay coaching tree. And this idea of this new generation of coaches in the NFL who are young, to be fair. Sean McVay is the youngest coach in NFL history. But part of why they've had success is not because they're so close in age to their players, but because they go out of their way to explain the why. Because they recognize what I like to call that this is the Google generation. Yeah. This is a generation that their entire lives, if an idea has popped in their head, I wonder where this person went to school. I wonder how this person got their start. I wonder why a 4-3 defense is working better for this system than a 3-4. They can put it into a machine, spits out an answer. Yeah. Even if it wasn't to the extent of AI, as we are now seeing, at the same time, they were able to find the why. And because that then generated a naturally curious generation, I think for a lot of the people who oversee or teach those young people, it can be frustrating because it does require a little bit more time to spend answering questions. I am okay with that, because then the second point I wanted to make was one of the first things I was told in my first week being a full-time staffer at UNF was that our students struggle with problem solving. And while yes, I do agree, I think you do have students who, because they can access their teachers, they can access anyone on campus as simple as sending an email, sending a text message, and they think that that's what they have to do because that's what has been drilled into them. Yes, maybe they aren't going to try to solve it on their first effort because they say, I need help, I need help. That's kind of the culture we've created, though, because of the interconnectedness. But to that same vein, I remember being told that on a Wednesday. Then on Thursday, I was lucky enough for our 904 day of service on September 4th. I was lucky enough to work with our men's basketball, women's basketball, softball, baseball, and women's golf teams. We took them to different community service outreach sites throughout Jacksonville. And the women's basketball team had significant roster turnover this past year, just 3 returners. And the 9 new girls all came up to me, shook my hand, knew my whole bio already, which I thought was crazy. But again, Google, they're all Googling
Hello,
me.
scary, but okay.
Right. And couldn't have been more engaging. And we had them building furniture at the Youth Crisis Center for the new maternity ward for single moms and moms in need. And these women, these young women, were building furniture with nothing but an instruction manual. And while, yes, the coaches were around and yes, the YCC staffers were there, they did it with a smile. They were engaging to me. They wanted to talk to me. I wasn't just the supervisor for them. And I just couldn't help but look at that experience in a 24-hour window of being told, oh, well, they can't problem solve. They have to ask someone for help all the time. And I'm like, these girls are building furniture, and like they went out of their way to look up who I was and to create a connection with me. And maybe it's a one-off, maybe it's not, but it was one of those moments where, yes.
Well, you're pretty approachable, Mia. So
that
I can
too.
see.
I also look like I'm 12, so like that also certainly helps. So I look like I'm one of them.
Petite is.
Yeah, exactly. 5'2". If I know the camera doesn't really convey that. So, but it was one of those moments where, to your point, like we keep being told like, oh, they don't problem solve.
Well, the other thing is, it's interesting because I'm always comparing and contrasting my Navy experience with my civilian experience. And one of the challenges, and I point this out in my leadership talk to General Tryon's class, and that is, in the military, we don't take the time to explain the why because I can just tell you what to do.
Yes.
And that's not leadership.
No.
That's called management. And I don't necessarily have to, even though the military has this mythology about everybody in the military, you're all heroes and you're all, military leadership is not an oxymoron. But in reality, without having the Uniform Code of Military Justice there as a backstop, a lot of success rate would plunge because we don't take the time to really convey the purpose of the mission. Exactly. And that became one of my earlier interviews today was a Master Chief who served with me on my ship, USS Way City, who works with me today after nearly 20 years as civilians. And again, there was never a question of why we're doing what we're doing. I start there.
Right.
I was in command of USS Way City with him, 9/11, and calling the crew together and say, okay, now we have a new purpose. And all the stuff I was telling you about over here to make sure we could go to sea, 400 sailors, 4,000 fingers, 4,000 toes, go out. I need that many coming back.
Right.
This is why I took those efforts. And boom, light goes on. So the why is, I thank you for giving me a platform to kind of plug my own vision.
And selfishly, since we are going to hopefully record our UNF Leadership Podcast episode with you after this.
Do that again?
We are going to talk about it again, just because I do think that is something that I have really taken away from my experience in the Taylor Leadership Institute, being so engrossed now in the material, especially as I pursue my master's in educational leadership at UNF, this idea of because I said so is not good enough anymore. And without saying any names, I've experienced many NFL coaches who they tried to operate that way because they had success earlier in their careers doing it. Because when they coached at the college level, once upon a time when student athletes were not earning dollars and cents thanks to name, image, and likeness, and you could just float this carrot of, well, if you don't do this, I'm going to pull your scholarship away. And because the student lived in fear, the student athlete lived in fear, they would answer to that.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist anymore. And it's not just because those student athletes are being paid, just because those NFL players are being paid millions of dollars. It's because they're naturally curious and they want to understand the entire pieces of the puzzle, not just one or two pieces that they're a part of.
Well, Well, Mia, this has been a delight. It's been a long time putting this together. I really
Yes.
appreciate you coming through for me today.
Absolutely.
And I'm looking forward to working with you again with Taylor Leadership Institute. And that's
Maybe I pair you with the student who wants to be a vet if no one comes through. Maybe that's
okay. Well, just shoot me a note.
okay.
I don't get as many notes from Matt as I used to. I feel a little sad. But this is Captain Rick, Legacy of Leaders, and our guest today, Mia Obrien from the Taylor Leadership Institute. Thank you so much for your time, and God bless.